Good evening, everyone. Good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Sebastiano Capponi. I'm the owner and winemaker at Villa Calcinaia, which is our family estate. But my family comes from Florence. We are actually, where I'm right now, we are in the office of the Palazzo Capponi in Florence. I do have a picture of Palazzo Capponi. I can share it with you. Let me see where it is. Palazzo Capponi. Here we go. Here's Palazzo Capponi right here. Okay. Screen sharing, you share. Let me make it bigger for you. So this is Palazzo Capponi alle Rovinate. That's where I'm talking from, right on the Arno River. My family has been in Florence for a very long time, for about a little over 800 years. I am the member of the family for this generation who takes care of the administration of the of both of the real estate and the winery. And we were back in Florence. We were merchants when we started shop. We were silk merchants, then we became wool merchants, and then we, with the money made from selling this product from the trade, we started loaning it to people in interest, and we became bankers. We had banks all over Europe. Remember, Italy was not just a single state; it was multiple states. So we had banks in Rome, we had banks in Bologna, we had banks in Milan, in Lyon, in France, and in Barcelona, and in London. The family made wealth with the banking business, of course, and they started buying properties. And since we are a family from the south part of the city of Florence, from the Oltrarno side, so this palace is in the Oltrarno side, which can translate beyond the Arno, because the original nucleus of Florence, it's not on my side, but it was on the other side where the Duomo is. We are on the beyond the Arno, which is kind of the newer area of Florence that started to be built around the 5th, 6th century after Christ. So that meaning, going back to the fact that we were southerners, so from the southern part of the city, our expansion was naturally in the region of Chianti. In 1524, we purchased the estate. We can show you. I can show you another picture. You share. Let me see. Here it is. Share. This is the picture that that was attached to the contract, which describes the property that was purchased in 1524 by my family in the Valley of Greve. The 4 farmsteads that you see in the picture, the main one being the Calcinaia, here on the right, on the lower right, next to the church of San Piero Alpino, and the little hamlet that went with the church, and with 2 guard towers called one Sepale on the left-hand side, and Bastignano, which was already ruined in 1524. So now the house does not exist anymore. We bought this property from the Del Caccia family, and we were borders with a famous traveler, a famous explorer called Verrazzano, the Verrazzano family, where Giovanni Verrazzano was the person who actually found the Hudson Bay and the bridge that connects Staten Island to Brooklyn is called the Verrazzano Bridge, in fact. The estate was run through the sharecropping system for a very long time. While I speak, I'm gonna send you some old pictures that will kind of, you all kind of see also one point as sharecroppers as well. There we go. And this is the picture of the winery. There it is. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. Go by itself. And the estate was run through the sharecropping system, and for many, many centuries, the sharecropping system is based on a family living on the land and sharing the crop with the landlord. So 50% of the crop will be kept by the landlord, and 50% of the crop will be kept by the sharecropper. And that meant that the sharecropper will always make everything that they needed to cultivate, everything that was needed for the sustenance. That would mean not just wine, but to mean olive oil, would mean some vegetables. It would mean fruit trees. It would mean, not much meat, because meat was more of a luxury back then. And the cow was all used as a working tool, most important, for to plow the fields. So it was a varied diet, of course, lots of beans. Tuscany were known for the beans, and this system continued for many centuries. It started to dwindle and ceased in the 50s with the reconstruction of Italy after the Second World War and the Marshall Plans, and because people started to inundate and started to leave the countryside to go and live in the cities. Why does this thing not? This is my aunt. I'm trying to understand why this thing doesn't do it on its own. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can do something like this. I hate when this thing happens. Stop share. Sorry about that. Because I'm not that good at this thing. I mean, because I did the other day.
Oops.
Also, Sebastiano, there are some more attendees now, so when you have a moment, if you promote them to panelists, then they can all share their videos as well.
Sure. I will do that. Okay. Participants. So allow more, promote to panelist, more, promote to panelist, more, promote to panelist, more. Okay, I think I've done them all. Okay, got it. Sorry, I'm trying to trasmettere il dispositivo, modifica image preview, stampa, condivisione, galleria. Perché non fa? Anyhow.
If you open a photo and then just put it in that slideshow form, it should be.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Oh, maybe. Oh, there you go. I didn't push the right button. There we go. Yeah. Okay, got it.
Right.
Okay, so that meant that people started leaving the countryside, and we had to. My father, my grandfather had to rethink about the way of doing things, and they started planting monocultural fields. So the things completely changed. From making produce for your sustaining your family, you started to focus on some products because you didn't have any sharecroppers anymore. You had employees, so you needed to cultivate something that you could sell on the market, and with the revenues, pay your employees. And so between the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they tried different things, of course, because the momentous times, they didn't have a formula how to start doing something changing something that's been going on for 1,000 years. It was changing in a matter of 5-6 years, So they tried different things. Amongst the things they tried, they started planting vineyards and olive groves. And they planted between the 50s, 60s, and 70s about 70 acres of vineyards and about 20 acres of olive groves. I came into the picture in 1992, and I started working at the winery in 1992, and I learned my winemaking and olive oil making on site. I don't have a formal agronomic background. I am a political science major, so very much like Alex, I guess. And so that was what I learned from experience by working on the fields. The major things I've done were, of course, to change of farming. The farming used to be conventional. In 92, I changed it to integrated. In 97, I asked for my organic certification. It took me 3 years to obtain organic certification because you have to go through a conversion period. It's like when you change religion. They want to see if you're actually mean it or you're not actually, if you're serious about it. And then in 2000, I got my organic certification. And then the second thing I've done, it was to restore some of the vineyards that were planted by my parents, and the vineyards I could not keep, I still managed to salvage all the material that was in there. So being a very old winery or old farm, old estate, we had many vineyards going back to the sharecropping time. And in those vineyards, we found many varietals that were kind of close to extinction, or unknown, or still unknown, you know. The first wine we'll talk about tonight is actually a fruit of a mistake, because Comitale, which is, I know you don't have it, but I'll pour myself some if you don't mind. Comitale, it's a white wine made with the Grechetto and Vernaccia, and it is why it's a strange story in a sense that the vineyard was planted in 1967. It was meant to be Trebbiano and Malvasia, which are the local varietals, but it was a flood in Florence in 1966, and the flood hit the lower valley of the river where all the nurseries were, and all the name tags got washed away. So in the springtime, when my father purchased about the equivalent of 14 acres, 15 acres of vineyards, he thought he was planting local varietals, and in fact they were planting completely different things. In this case, they were planting Grechetto and Vernaccia. Now the Grechetto and Vernaccia, Vernaccia is a Tuscan grape. Grechetto is a grape that grows in Umbria and in Lazio. And my father's agent suggested to make white wine out of these two grapes. We couldn't possibly use it in a Chianti Classico blending. And because back in those days, white grapes were still allowed in a blending. And my father said, "Just sure, let's try something." And we need a white wine for reception. We need wine for the summertime. The pictures that you see now are the sharecroppers harvesting. So these are the vineyards that were, this is, I think, the harvest of 1967, if I'm not mistaken.
We're seeing, Sebastiano, we've got all of the pictures up. It's thumbnails and everything.
We're seeing the folder rather than the slideshow, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Where is it? Now?
Not yet. Now I see it.
You see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So these are the sharecroppers actually harvesting. We can go back some pictures. Oh, you'll see. We'll roll over. You'll see them all. So basically, my father's agent went back to him and proposed the first sample of Comitale that was back in the early 70s. And my father said, my father spoke the Queen's English, and he tasted the wine and said, "Oh, this is rather good lemonade. We should try to do something better than that." So eventually we got an knack of things, and we started making this white wine every year since. The blend has changed throughout the years. There was some Gewürztraminer involved at one point, but now it's been Grechetto and Vernaccia pretty solidly in the last 15 years, I would say. Great wine.
Describe it a little bit.
Yeah, I was about to. I was drinking.
Sorry.
I can't do this. Drinking and talking would be not proper.
You can't enjoy the wine, Sebastiano. You have to talk to us.
The white wine, this is a white wine that ages very well. I think that it gets better and better with time. It gets more kind of a waxy kind of texture. So it's quite full, and it has a very herbal character. So it makes it very ideal for me. It's very good pairing with all the vegetable dishes, you know, especially if you have, crunchy vegetables or some okra snappies, some dishes with involved vegetables, or if you do a very nice fish with some texture, I would say, not just a sole, white Dover sole. I would go with more something like a sea bass or a grouper, something with a little more texture, because the acidity is there, and the acidity will help kind of cut through the fat of the fish, and of course, being a more kind of a savory white, it goes very well with sweeter tinged meats like shrimps, like scallops, or mussels, So something that has a little more sweetness that pairs well with the kind of herbal and more savory character of this wine. So first wine is Comitale. Then we'll talk about the wine that you actually have in the shop right now, which is the Rosé, the Rosato. I'm pouring some for me too. The rosato, the reason why I made rosato goes Villa Calcinaia rosato. Here it is. It's because I basically think that we make a mistake in Tuscany, and the mistake is to pair charcuterie with Sangiovese. You go to a local restaurant in Tuscany, and they will offer you antipasto toscano, which is mainly charcuterie and chicken liver crostini, and you will order a bottle of red wine, Sangiovese base, Chianti Classico, Brunello Montalcino, Nuovo di Montepulciano, you know. And the problem is that the blood that it's inside the charcuterie, the cold cuts, does not match with the Sangiovese, because Sangiovese is a tannic grape, and tannins clash with the blood component, the massive component of the food, and so it will bring out a metallic taste in your mouth, and you think, oh, that's probably the wine. It's the wine's problem. It's not the wine's problem. It's the pairing's problem. So every time I have some charcuterie, we make our own charcuterie. We make our own salami, our own prosciutto. I always have a wine with a red, white, or rosé that doesn't have much in terms of tannins. You know, if you go to Piemonte, you will never see a Piemontese eating prosciutto or carne salata with Nebbiolo. They will have a Fresa. They will have maybe Barbera, but never a Nebbiolo. So that's why I started making the rosé, because the way I do wine is always connected with food. I don't drink wine outside meals. I drink wine during meals. So I said to me, okay, let's make a rosé. And of course, you know, there are three ways of making rosés. The simple one, you mix some red wine and white wine. And luckily for us, the European Union has not allowed that. And the second way is to bleed from a red wine and make with the same grape, you make two products. And there is a third way, which is basically picking the grapes very early and taking the free run from the press and making rosé this way. And this is the best, for me, it's the best way, because you pick the grapes early, and so the acidity is very high and the alcohol is low. So you make a rosé that can actually withstand the passing of the years. So this is a rosé that drinks well now, but it will drink even better next year. So I know that. I know that it's from a retail point of view, it's not the best thing, because I know that rosé is sold only in two phases: the pre-sale and closeouts. But you know, that's the way it is.
It's such a shame.
I know. But you know, people were not drinking rosé back then. Now they're back drinking. You know, you need just to educate them that there's some rosés that you can actually drink with some age on.
The good rosés taste better with age, like this one.
Okay, now for the next wine that you don't have, but I have here, I am gonna go back to the history of my family. Next wine is called Mauvais Chapon. Oh, 5 more. Okay, hold on 1 second. I have to let people in first. Hold on.
Sebastiano, someone asked as well, what would you ideally pair with the rosé?
The charcuterie.
What would I pair with rosé? Yeah, sure. Charcuterie, of course. That's the typical answer. Baked ham, great with baked ham, and especially, you know, and Thanksgiving turkey. It's definitely a great pairing for it, because turkey is kind of a more of a, kind of say, not very tasty meat. That's why you need the filling, you need all the gravy and all that. And rosé does match very well, because it doesn't have it's not a strong meat that will cover the flavor of the wine. So I guess, yeah, those 3 things. Of course, you can do fish. Again, I would do more on a sweet fish. So I would go more for scallops, again, because the acidity is very high. So I would go again for scallop and shrimps. Those would be my choices for sure. I will share a new share now. For this, I need a picture from the old days. So I need a picture for, first of all, I need to present the character. The character is Piero Capponi. Here he is. This statue of Piero Capponi is on the Uffizi Gallery. It's the 4 statues of the Uffizi Gallery that face the river. And they were put there for a very specific reason, because these 4 characters are the 4 defenders of Florence. Farinata degli Uberti, Francesco Ferrucci, Giovanni dalle Bande Nere, and Piero Capponi. Piero Capponi is a defender of Florence because of an episode that happened in 1494, which was the siege of Florence by the French army. We have a picture that we can share to see the episode. No, not this one here. Sorry about that. I need to. Oh God.
Sebastiano, the risotto is also a risotto di cannaiolo, right?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the risotto is made of 100% cannaiolo. The reason why I chose cannaiolo over Sangiovese is because cannaiolo it's a more, can I say, prettier grape than Sangiovese, so it's less masculine, less tannic than Sangiovese is, and that's why by picking it early, I wanted to use a grape that is more kind of mellow than Sangiovese is. So, and Cannaiolo has a beautiful bouquet, so that's also another reason why I chose Cannaiolo over Sangiovese to make Rosato.
The one thing I would like to insert here is the trick with the Cannaiolo also is not to serve it too cold, because the bouquet really comes out when it's just maybe half an hour in the fridge before you drink it. You still want to get all the aromatics, and when it's too cold, you lose that, and you lose some of the layers of flavor on the palate too.
So next wine is called Mauvais Chapon. It's a sparkling wine. It's a classic method, so champagne method. And I was telling you about why it's called Mauvais Chapon. It goes back to 1494. You see the picture of the confrontation between Piero Capponi, my ancestor, on the left, and the King of France, Charles VIII, on the right. Piero was the head of the delegation, of the Florentine delegation, went to parley with the king. Parley is such a wonderful word. Thanks, Pirates of the Caribbean, for teaching it to us. And they went to parley with the king, and the king asked for a ransom. And Piero Capponi brought a counteroffer. The king was not happy with the counteroffer, and he said, if this is your final offer, we're going to blow our trumpets, invade the city. And famous reply of Piero Capponi was, if you're going to blow your trumpets, we're going to toll our bells and call the population to defend the city. So this episode became very, very famous, very, very prominent during the unification of Italy as an example of an Italian fighting for his homeland, which wasn't the case because Italy was, back in those days, just a geographical expression. But, you know, it brought good propaganda to the family, so nobody actually complained. And but there's a kind of an addendum to this episode, which is narrated to us by Jacopo Nardi in Storie Fiorentine, because Piero Capponi knew the king, and he had been ambassador in France previous to this episode, and so he met him several times. And he was about to leave the room, and the king called him back, and smiling, he said to him, "Chapon, Chapon, vous êtes un mauvais chapon," which can be translated in English as "Capon, Capon, you're a very bad capon." Making a joke, of course, on my family name, which is Capponi, which means capons, and of course, and the fact that we are kind of the name is linked to a type of bird, and so we thought, you know, this is a wine that people think, when people think of sparkling, think of France, and I said that we'll give it a French name to it. It's 100% Sangiovese, the Mauvais Chapon, and it's 100% Sangiovese. I have the tech fiche somewhere. Let me see if I can bring it out. Mauvais Chapon, Mauvais Chapon, Mauvais Chapon. Where is it? I have it here. I don't have it here. Okay, hold on. This is goes away. Sorry about that. Too many things. There we go. Schede tecniche, here we go. Schede tecniche inglese. Okay, Mauvais Chapon, here we go.
While we're working that, Sebastiano, Ellen asked how much of your estate is planted Cannaiolo?
Cannaiolo is about, the vineyard of Cannaiolo is about 4 acres. 4 acres. So out of 70 acres. 4 acres are Canaiolo. It's an old vine vineyard planted in 1967. So here's the Moisha Pond bottle. Hope you can see it.
Yeah, it looks,
I can probably make it a little bigger. Here we go. Here we go. This is him. And we do, with this wine, we do about, what Beverly has is a 2014 vintage. It's 37 months on lease. And when we did the gorgement, which happened in April 2018, April 2018, we added a little bit of liqueur d'expédition. We use Vinsanto as liqueur. So it's a brut. It's a brut, so it's about a little less than 15 grams of residual sugar. It doesn't feel like a brut because the acidity is pretty intense. So it's definitely a great wine for pairing with coquillage. You know, if you have oysters, or if you have again, I would go more for sweeter fish like a crawfish or mussels. That would be my pairing again.
crab, shrimp,
Yeah, shrimp and scallop and langoustine, lobster. Yeah, that would be definitely a nice dinner.
oysters.
Oysters, it's if they're sweet ones. The salty ones can be
Oysters from the Gulf rather than from.
more the kind of the
Atlantic.
Japanese ones, which are a little sweeter, a little more texture and less. Not I wouldn't get the oysters which are very salty. You know, very kind of
Briny.
what's the word in English when it tastes
Briny.
Briny. Yeah, briny. Yeah, I would go for something a little sweeter. Okay, so now we get into the main core of this presentation, which is the Chianti Classico, of course, because we've talked about many wines, but we haven't talked about the king of the hill, the Sangiovese, and the Sangiovese made in this area is used to make Chianti Classico. Now to Chianti Classico, your screen sharing, new share. Here we go. Presentation. Here we go. Screen sharing, new share. There we go. Chianti Classico, the Black Rooster wine. So can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay. So Chianti Classico comes from a very small region. The region is called, to make things complicated, beautiful region, by the way, it's called Chianti. Chianti is in between the city of Florence and the city of Siena. And you see the map of Italy. You see Tuscany, and in the middle of Tuscany, there's a little region. Only 140,000 acres. And under vine, only 15% of it. So about 20,000 acres under vine. In fact, the question people ask when they come to Chianti is that where are the vineyards? Because people, don't see them because we have so many woodland, so much plains without vineyard, so the vineyards are a little bit hidden. It's not like when you go to Bordeaux or to Langhe, where everything is dominated by the vineyard. This is an area which is, and its beauty is this, that only 15% of the land is occupied by vineyards. So you have an alternance of olive groves, of woodland, of plains, of hills, and it makes it really wonderful region. The region has been making wine for centuries, for many, many centuries. It had one peak of interest and of expansion, especially in the foreign markets at the beginning of the 1700s, because Queen Anne of England of Great Britain was a great fan of Chianti wines. And in the beginning of the century was also an invention of fiasco, because the fiasco was invented by the Tuscans to ship the wine to UK and to Belgium without having to ship it in the barrels. Because the problem by shipping the wine in barrels is they had to go through Gibraltar and all the way up. And by the time they got to the market, most of the barrels would be half empty because of oxidation. And the wine would be some of the wines would be probably not tasting very well. So they invented the fiasco because we have a big production of glass blowing in Colle Valdelsa, which is near Siena. And they invented the straw covering in order to be able to ship this wine, and allowed them to put a little bit of oil on top of the wine and put some straw as a cork, you know. And in that way, the wine could come to the market and be in good condition. Now, what was the problem? The problem was that being the wine very popular, people started making in the same style of, and so the British merchants started complaining about fake Chianti in the British market. That's why in 1716, the Grand Duke Cosimo III established by decree the area of production of the wine called Chianti. Now, which entitled this area as the first kind of area with the first appellation by decree in the world. And the problem was that this malpractice of imitating Chianti continued throughout the centuries. And it peaked enormously with the popularity of Chianti, when Chianti had risen again with the immigration of Italians into America. So much popularity, as I said, that if you buy a book and if you read the second novel by Sherlock Holmes, by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, called The Sign of Four, at one point, Sherlock Holmes goes to somebody's house and is offered a glass of Chianti. And the host says, "It's the only wine I keep in the house, together with some Malmsey." And some Madeira, sorry, it's not some Malmsey, some Madeira. And that book was published in Philadelphia and in London, and it gives you the idea of the success of Chianti had back in those days. The problem was that the wine lost its sense of place and became a style of wine. So much so that if you go to your local, you know, Kroger's, Piggly Wiggly, Publix, whatever you buy your grocery, you can go to the jug section and you can get a jug of Carlo Rossi Chianti or Francia Chianti, and that wine is made in Central California. In fact, the United States still considers the name Chianti semi-generic. Back in Italy, what happened was that the producers from the neighboring area of Chianti continued to make wine called Chianti. And the producer of the regional area did not do much to fight this practice. They only kind of awakened in 1924, and they have established a consortium for the defense. Let's see if I have a picture here. There we go. Here we go. They established the consortium for the defense of the wine of Chianti, and they adopted the black rooster as a symbol. Black rooster has always been the symbol of Chianti. So going back to the map, unfortunately, they woke up too late, because in 1932, the Italian state established for good which areas could produce a wine called Chianti and which areas could produce the wine called Chianti Classico. So basically what the bone that the government threw to us was, you're the original area, you can add the word Classico to your wine in order to distinguish yourself from the other. And the problem was that they made us a sub-zone of the big area Chianti. And we only been able to sever the bond in 1996. So from 1996 onwards, we're an independent appellation. Before, we were a sub-appellation of the big mother Chianti. And you see in the map, there's a gray area, a map of Tuscany here. Let me see if where I go. There is I don't know how to.
We can see it, it's good.
Okay, it's good. There's a gray area, that's the area where you can make Chianti, and the red area in the middle, that's the area where you can make Chianti Classico, and it's the region called Chianti. So if you want to buy a legit Chianti, you need to look for a Chianti Classico. And now, how do you find a Chianti Classico on the shelf? It's simple. Just look for the chicken. If there's a black rooster on the bottle, it means it's a Chianti Classico. The position could be here, or could be on the back label, on top of the back label. So you just look on the front or turn the bottle to see if there's a black rooster on. Then it's a Chianti Classico, and it's a legit wine of Chianti. Villa Calcinaia Chianti Classico, which is the first wine we're going to talk about, is 90% Sangiovese, and 10% Canaiolo. And it's our flagship. It's the wine, the most important wine I make. It's the wine that really, it's a kind of a business card, or if you wish, our first date with a customer. And it better be good, because if the first date is not good, there's usually no second date. So that's why we strive to make a good Chianti Classico Nata. And I say that it's the Chianti Classico Nata as a category, and as you can see in the pyramid, it represents the bottom of the pyramid, and it's about 65% of the appellation. It's growing. The way you see an appellation, and you judge an appellation also from the wines that that come on the market first. The wines that are considered more simple, which are, it's not the case, but that are made in more bigger numbers. And I think the quality of Chianti Classico Nata in these years has grown, and my appellation enormously. In our case, the Sangiovese component has to be 80% minimum. In this case, there's 90% in this wine, and there's a 10% of Canaiolo grapes. The fruit comes from the old vines, so it doesn't come from the younger vines I planted, but from the older vines that my father and my grandfather planted. When it comes to food pairing here, my go-to is tomato. I think about pasta pomodoro, spaghetti pomodoro, very nice. Some garlic, beautiful. Or if I'm having a meat, maybe you can do a tomato-based meat, like what you have in the state. You have a famous veal piccata. So provided it's not too spicy, the veal piccata, this will go very, no, veal pizzaiola. Sorry, got it. I always got to get them wrong. But tomato-based dishes will always be a go-to for me. The wine has a medium body, so it can sustain even easily a steak, easily grilled meats and everything like that. I think that and it has enough elegance to be paired with many dishes. Good. Next wine. Next wine is the Chianti Classico Reserve.
Sebastiano, someone just asked why Chianti pairs so well with tomato and
oh, sure,
red sauce and such.
Because the acidity of tomato mellows down the acidity of Sangiovese. It makes the wines kind of sweeter in your mouth. So that's why you always, in this case, you have you pair by concordance. Acid plate with acid wine. But the acidity of the tomato will make the wine even taste even better. That's why I always advise for tomato-based dishes.
So would you say tomatoes have more acidity than the wine, and that's why the contrast between the two makes the wine softer?
Exactly. That is why. The Chianti Classico Reserva is, in this case, it's 100% Sangiovese. So the appellation allows me to make up to 100% Sangiovese, and you see, it's the middle of the pyramid. It represents, the Reserva in our appellation represents about 35% of the total production. This is all vines Reserva, so all vines, again, vineyards planted by my father and my grandfather. And I always use a whiskey comparison. In this case, it's my best blended wine, because even though it's made only with one grape, it's the best blend of all the old vineyards. So in this case, is the ability of the winemaker to taste all the different vineyards and make the best blend out of it. We vinify all the vineyards separately. And we age it separately for at least 15, 18 months. And then we do a blind tasting of all the wines we have and all the different blocks. And then we decide what the blends are going to be. And when it comes to food, we have a little more structure here, a little more tannic structure. So I would definitely go for a little more robust dishes, maybe some meat, but with some preparation behind it, not just simply grilled. Maybe I would go with some stews, or I'm gonna go with some braised meats, brasato. Maybe do a brasato using the Reserva, so that would be a nice way to pair it. Always use a good wine even when you cook. I'm not a big fan of cooking wine. I think it's like with olive oil. If the wine is good and the olive oil is good, the dish also tastes better. So this is the Chianti Classico Reserva. The term Reserva comes from the sharecropping time because it was the wine reserved for the proprietor. In fact, if you go to California, go to Napa, there are many wineries who do the proprietor reserve. And it was the wine that was bottled for the proprietor and used for special occasions. So it was usually the only wine in bottle that you can find on the estate. You know, the rest would be sold in fiaschi or in demijohns. The last appellation wine, red appellation wine for tonight, for Chianti Classico appellation, is the Gran Selezione. Now, the Gran Selezione is the top of the pyramid, about 5% of the production of the appellation. And in my case, my vision on this, because the appellation allows me to make this wine using my own grapes, okay? You're not allowed to buy grapes to make Gran Selezione. It has to be your own grapes. The problem is everything is my own grapes. I don't buy grapes. I don't buy wine. And so I wanted to be a little more specific. And by being more specific, I associated the concept of Gran Selezione to single vineyards. So I make 3 of them, and they are all come from different vineyards, which I will show you now. And the concept in this case is not so much the ability of the winemaker of blending different fields. It's the vineyard who's the main character and speaks for herself. So she's the one who characterizes the wine. My work is just to accompany the vineyard in its process and making sure that she's suitable to be bottled on her own. We do a blind tasting again, and if we find that she has a character to be bottled on her own, we bottle it. If not, she gets blended with the rest. So this is one of my single malts. So if the Reserva was my best blended, the Gran Selezione are my single malts. And the Sangiovese, the beauty of Sangiovese is that it's a very transparent grape. So what goes in the field, what's in the field, what's in the microclimate of what the French call in one word, climat, it shows in the bottle. So we can have 3 different Sangiovese from 3 different vineyards, and it will be completely different from one another. Let me show you okay. Let me show you the picture of the vineyard, which probably will be here. So the vineyard we're going to talk about tonight is called Bastignano, and Bastignano is Bastignano.
Of course, we had to pick the one that's hardest to pronounce.
Of course. Always a challenge, always a new challenge. Here's Bastignano. So you see, here we go. All this terrace ground goes up to the umbrella pine trees. That is Bastignano. Bastignano is a vineyard planted on very rocky soil. The main rock that you'll find in Bastignano is Alberese in 2 conditions, as a rock or as a shale. When it's a shale, we'll call it Galestro. So Galestro is not a rock per se, it's a status, a condition of the rock. So when it kind of, because being a calcareous rock, it tends to, when it's exposed to the air and to the sun, it kind of crumbles, you know. And so we have a lot of Galestro of Alberese and some outcrops of Alberese, of the rock Alberese as well. So, but the soil is very shallow. You hit the bedrock after few feet, maybe not even a couple, and that means that the vines have to go through the crack. The vine roots have to go through the crack to find moisture. It's a loam clay soil, so they don't have to go very deep because loam retains a part of moisture. And an advantage of this kind of soil being very loose kind of soil, it does not, there's no effect of capillary evaporation in the summertime. So the plant thrive throughout the summer, they never stop. On clay soil, sometimes as the summer is very droughty, the plants kind of stop, there's lack of water, and they stop the maturation of the grapes. So in this case, it's a very unfertile land, but it works very well for vines and olive trees. Let me see another picture of Bastignano here. Let me see.
I always think the origin of the Bastignano vines is really special because these plants were propagated from really ancient vines that had been on the property almost 100 years, right?
Yeah, they come from the old vineyards and the sharecropping vineyards. Yes, this is a selection of those vineyards, and as you can see, the vines are all raised tree-like. We call it alberello, little tree, and so the vine lanes actually are curved. They're not straight. They follow the walls, which were built by our ancestors in such a way to hold soil in order to have any kind of in order to avoid erosion. So I haven't done anything genial here. It's just restoring what was there. Just finding what was there. It was my job. Let me see if
What's the benefit of having the terraces for growing the grapes?
you hold the soil. You avoid erosion. You avoid erosion. If you don't have terraces or the good soil will be eroded down to the bottom of the hill. So that's why they build terraces. And also, you work on flat land, so it's much less dangerous if you're driving a tractor because you're working on flat land. You're not working on the slope, so there's less chance of a capsizing. So there's a lot of advantages of having terraces. This is Sangiovese from Bastignano. And this is a vine lane, as I explained before. You see how it curves, is not straight. The other two vineyards that we don't have tonight, the single vineyard, are La Fornace, which is this one here, which is the 1975 vineyard, whereas Bastignano was planted in 2004. And this is on a more sandier soil. So the vine, the Sangiovese here has a more kind of a more, if I can use a Burgundy comparison, more a Chambol Musigny kind of style. So more light on his feet, more elegant. Or Bastignano has definitely more tannic structure. And the fact that it's surrounded by three sides by the wood, it gives a very kind of more of a spicy and kind of wild kind of character to the wine. And the third little single vineyard is the Contessa Luisa, which is here it is, which is this one here. Contessa Luisa, which was planted in 1959, and it's northwest facing on clay soil. So Bastignano is on silt, loam silt, Fornace is on sand, and Contessa Luisa is on clay. So again, here we have more fruit character, we have more tannic structure, we definitely have more generosity here. Completely different kind of Sangiovese. Now, we leave the appellation for a while, and we talk about rare varietals. The rare varietals that I discovered in the fields were many, and the ones I vinify and bottle on their own are Occhio Rosso, which is this picture here, called the red eye. Red eye because the bud before breaking is red. And that's why the farmers call it Occhio Rosso. It's a great varietal that does not been yet registered in the varietal register. We are starting the process with University of Florence. It will take 3-4 years to do it, and then it will be available for everyone to be used and planted. And it's a great varietal that I think has great potential. I've planted more this year. I planted another acre and a half of Occhio Rosso, because right now I'm making only a barrel, only making 300 bottles. So what Beverly has is it's a big chunk of what I make, and it's a beautiful varietal because it ages very, very well, and it has a kind of a very the tannic, what is, apart from the profile, of course, the nose profile, which is different from Sangiovese, but the main thing that differs from Sangiovese is the tannic structure, because it's a tannic structure reminds me more of Nebbiolo, because the tannins are finer and more densely packed. So and it's the only wine that we make in wood, that we age in wood. The other two great varietals that we can talk about are Sanforte and Mammolo. Those two varietals are instead made in stainless steel and are meant to be consumed a little younger. And the Mamolo, it's a great varietal. I mean, it's been kind of praised by many poets and many writers in the past. Francesco Redi in Back in Toscana describes the Mamolo as one of the best grape to make wine. So, but it's a grape that has high acid. So it's again another great. Remember when I talked about rosé and the charcuterie? This is not a great wine for charcuterie because it doesn't have much in terms of tannins. So it goes very, very well with charcuterie. So Mamolo, it will be another one. And I think Beverly has a theory about Mamolo. What does Mamolo taste like, in your opinion?
It tastes like rooibos tea to me,
There you go.
which is kind of a bright berry flavor if you're not familiar with it. So I don't know if it's considered a red tea, but it's very red in color anyway. And it has a very distinct flavor that reminds me of this wine quite a bit, or the wine reminds me of the tea. I'm not sure which way it goes. But
The
it's
color
really-
violet was a wine. That's what I generally get with Mamolo as well.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very-
Mamolo, it's called Mamolo because of the Viola Mammola, which is the violet, of course. And that's why the Tuscans call it Mamolo because it reminds them, and Alex is correct in saying that, it reminds them of the violet. The Sanforte instead it's a newly registered varietal and only in 2012 by the University of Pisa. And it's called Sanforte because it was planted in the same vine rows of Sangiovese, but it ripened before Sangiovese. And so the farmers will call it Sangiovese Forte because when they will pick the grapes, it will always have higher alcohol. And when the University of Pisa registered the varietal, they on purpose they kind of made a contraction of the two words Sangiovese Forte, in order not to generate confusion because it has nothing to do with Sangiovese. The plant is completely different from Sangiovese. It doesn't taste like Sangiovese. It's just happened that it was planted in the same vine rows of Sangiovese. And Sanforte, it has because of its capacity, of its ability of accumulating sugars, it does go very well with spicy dishes, in my opinion. So I always pair it with some, Thai food because it has a sweetness to it that fruit sweetness to it that it goes very well, I think, with the more spicy food and doesn't have much in terms of tannins. So I think spicy Thai food would be very good, or Indian for that reason. Always do spicy food with this wine. Next one, it would be this varietal here that I'm going to show you. Here it is. This varietal here was planted in 1967. It was meant to be Sangiovese, but there was, as I mentioned before, it was a flood in Florence. My father's agent that year planted about the equivalent of 14 acres of vine. And when he planted this vineyard, he realized it was not Sangiovese when the plant started to bud, and he thought it was some kind of Black Malmsey. Nobody questioned the statement, and for 30 years we knew that little vineyard as the Black Malmsey vineyard. In 1996, I started this research program at the University of Florence, and the professor was helping me, an amplographer, so an expert on vines, pointed out to me that was not Black Malmsey, that was Merlot. And I was kind of shocked by the news because it was very adamant and verbal in letting people know that I will never plant a single international varietal on my estate, and there it was, planted prior to my birth. So I said, okay, I guess if you can't beat them, we'll join them. And in 1997, I started making my first and only Super Tuscan. It's the only concession to the category, and the Super Tuscan is called Casarsa. Casarsa, it's 100% Merlot from a very old vineyard. You see the trunk of this vine. We can see another picture. There's a leaf. Here it is. She's a beauty. She's a real.
Wow.
And old vines, I can show you a picture of a plant of Sangiovese as well. Old vines have the ability of knowing how much they can make. As you can see, this plant hasn't made 10 bunches of 12 bunches. It made the right amount that she can hold. And so the fruit, it's always better in old vines than in younger vines. Because in younger vines, if I want them to make less, I have to intervene. I have to cut down the product. You know, I have to do green harvest. And there will always be a reaction from the plant because, you know, some of the kids are gone, but she still has a lot of juice to give, and she will give more to the one that left. So what happens usually, the counter effect of the green harvest is that the grapes, the remaining grapes tend to swell more, and that might create problems if it's a rainy season, for example, because they might burst. In this case, the plant already knows how much they can do, and that's the right amount. And that is the right amount to make a good
It's
bottle of
so
wine.
beautiful.
Yeah. Let me show
Wow.
you a picture of the Sangiovese, this is Sangiovese. This is an old Sangiovese.
Wow.
This is a 1959 vine. She is she's a little older than the Merlot one. She is what, this year 61 years old.
Which vineyards are these old ones
This is
in?
Contessa Luisa. This is Contessa Luisa. And you see, Sangiovese tends to be much more gnarly than Merlot is. Merlot, if you see the trunk of Merlot,
It's like a tree.
it's like a tree. Sangiovese, although this vine is 12 years older than the other one, the trunk is more gnarly and not as big as the Merlot trunk. That's typical Sangiovese. It's very much a kind of vine kind of behavior. Vine, yeah, more than Merlot. Merlot has a little more like a tree-like kind of behavior. Last but not least, world of Vinsanto.
Do you want to talk, excuse me, do you want to talk a little bit about the flavor profile of the Merlot? Because
Sure.
distinctive.
Well, the Merlot, I always make a joke. I always tell that, you know, this gentleman was planted, or this lady, she was planted in the 1967 in Tuscany. And so her accent is definitely more Tuscan than French, which means that Merlot does very well. This is a good spot for Merlot, luckily, because it was planted on a northeastern facing vineyard, so very cool spot, and on clay soil. Merlot does very well on clay. All the great Merlot of the world, the Petrus, the Maceto, are planted on clay soil. Because what clay soil does to Merlot, it makes Merlot more interesting. It gives a nice character, a nice tannic structure, definitely enhances the fruit of the wine. The wine, my pairing for this wine is usually sweeter tinge meat. So one of my best pairing I've ever done is a Tuscan dish made famous by the French, which is duck à l'orange, duck with orange sauce, which is an original Tuscan dish that was brought to the French court by Catherine de' Medici when she became Queen of France, and I think that is a great dish to pair with this Merlot. Or lamb and venison come to mind, you know, when I think of the Merlot. Again, great aging wine. All the wines that I make, you know, tend to be get better with years. I mean, I'm a person that goes to the market quite late. I'm about to start selling 2017. There are many wineries in Calcinaia already on 18 and probably moving to 19 soon. But I think that wine needs time, and that's why I always go on the market a little later than the others. When we come to Vinsanto, we have to show you the.
I'd also add about the Merlot. Actually, the Merlot is by far the best Merlot I've ever had, and that includes Bordeaux as well. It's really phenomenal and absolutely unique. So if you're considering the Merlot, it's my highest recommendation.
Actually, if you've considered Merlot not worth trying, this will change your mind forever.
Absolutely.
It's just fabulous. It's really rich on the palate, incredibly long, layering flavors lasting forever. It's delicious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is the room where we hang the grapes to make Vinsanto. Vinsanto is made with mainly in my estate, mainly with three grapes, which are Trebbiano, Malvasia, and Canaiolo. So 2 white grapes and 1 red grape. And we let the grapes hang for until they reach 350, 400 grams of sugar. That may take from 3 to 6 months. And then we press those grapes and we put them in small barrels or Slavonian oak called Caratelli. And they stay in the Caratelli for about 9 years. Let me see if I have a picture. Oh, this is my son. Excuse me. No. Where is it? The picture of the Caratelli. Here they are. So they stay in the Caratelli for 9 years, and it's the Caratelli are not full. They're about 2/3 full, because you have to leave some leeway for the liquid to expand, and you need to cement the top of the barrel in order to avoid the cork from popping out, because the primary fermentation will start in a barrel, and the pressure from primary fermentation can go up to 16, 17 atmospheres. So you have to allow the liquid to expand by leaving some room in a barrel. So it's a wine obtained by process of oxidation. It's called Vino Santo because of the probably of the use that was traditionally used for mass wine, you know. And so the priest could keep the bottle in the sacristy for weeks in a row without the wine going bad, because the wine had already been oxidized. So that's probably why it's called holy wine. There's also an historical legend, if you wish, that goes back to the Council of Florence in the 1430s between the Eastern and Western Catholic churches. That was before the schism. One of the Greek bishop, the Bishop of Nicaea, which is in Asia Minor nowadays, Turkey now, tasted the wine and said, "Oh, this is Santos wine. This is the wine we make in Santos, which is a place in Greece." And so the Florentines, not understanding Greek, they said, "Oh, he likes the wine so much, he thinks that Santo is holy." So that's the other explanation. But I think it's a good story. But I think the sacramental wine is probably more to the point. Anyhow, the wine, it's ages 9 years in these barrels, and then it's bottled. All the harm you could down to the wine is already done in the winemaking process, so nothing can kill this wine. As Beverly always says, that the inability to age of this wine is not linked to its intrinsic qualities, but your willpower. So if you're able to resist drinking it, then you can age it for a long time. What do I pair with this? Nothing. For me, this is an after dinner wine. This is like my scotch. I don't feel sometimes, some nights, that I want to have an 80 proof or 90 proof. This is only 24 proof, 12 alcohol, and I put it in a sniffer, and I can enjoy it because it changes every time I put it on to the nose. You know, so I think for me, this is a really after dinner wine. This is something I can sip on more than drink.
Yeah, and if you can sip a little at a time, it'll last forever. I mean, once you open it, you don't have to worry about having to finish it within 2 days, 3 days, a week. It lasts as long as your willpower.
Exactly.
So, it's the reason I wanted to work with Sebastiano.
Exactly.
I just love the Vinsanto. I put it behind my ears sometimes.
So, any questions?
I guess I've got one to start with the questions. Sebastiano, you've said you don't usually like the international varietals intruding on Chianti. So how do you feel about Chiantis that are now made in a more modern styling with, rather than Caniolo, maybe Cabernet, Merlot, or Syrah in there?
Well, I usually prefer wine Sangiovese blended with local varietals, just because most of the time the international varietals tend to overpower a little bit. The only varietal that it's less overpowering, I think, in a blend with Sangiovese of the international varietal is probably Merlot. Cabernet Sauvignon is definitely a prima donna, so it's very difficult to achieve a good blend without losing the character of Sangiovese. That's my when you blend it with Cabernet Sauvignon. The Super Tuscan movement, though, has helped the region to be put on the fine wines market. So we can't throw everything away. I mean, there was the good thing about these producers in the 80s that started making more international style wines is allowed the region, Tuscany in general and Chianti Classico specifically, because some of the most important Super Tuscan of the world come from Chianti Classico. Tignanello would be the first come to mind, and Flaccianello would be the second one to come to mind, or Le Pergole Torte. So these wines come from Chianti Classico. They don't have, unfortunately, the Black Rooster on the bottle because that would be a big push for appellation. But they helped putting Tuscany on a fine wines map. And in that way, I think producers could go back to the original roots and rediscover what they had. So I think it was a cathartic process. Cathartic process, you had to go kind of side with the devil, if you wish, and then to find your true nature, and realize that you're probably doing something that was not completely right, and you should, because the thing about the local varietals in Sangiovese, it cannot be replicated anywhere in the world. I mean, they've tried planting Sangiovese somewhere else in the world. It doesn't come as well as in Tuscany. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, there's some interesting Sangiovese I've tasted around the world, but it's not the same thing. It's like Pinot Noir in Burgundy. I mean, Oregon, it's probably, and Central Otago down in New Zealand probably doing a very good job. But, Burgundy is still Burgundy, and Chianti Classico is still Chianti Classico. So, but I would not, I'm not one of the producers say, oh, let's, the 80s was a bad period because people lost the tradition of that. I mean, you probably needed that change in order to achieve what you achieved in the recent years.
I think people would find it interesting to know that some of your maceration is with hands and feet in the old style.
Yes. As I said before,
not something we associate with modern winemaking, I don't think.
No, you're right. As I said before, I vinify every single vineyard separately, so the vineyards can be big, medium, or small. And in the case of small vineyards or varietals that I have least amount of, I would use barrel fermentation. So I have pictures of that. Let me show you some pictures. Yeah, there is myself tasting from one of those barrels. And then in this way, I can extend. I can do experimentation with the skin, with the whole cluster. So I vary between 1/3 and 50% whole cluster, and I can extend the alcoholic fermentation for longer because by starting to break those grapes from the whole cluster, I put some more sugar inside the liquid, and so I bring the density up, and carbon dioxide production can last for longer. The sugar is consumed little by little. And in order to break those grapes, we use the old system, which is shown by my son right here, who's proudly wearing the Black Rooster shirt. And so Lucille Bowl style. And we start with our arms, and then we continue with our legs. And that's the reason why we do that, as I said, is to increase the amount of carbon dioxide production. And also in smaller vessels, the ratio between skins and liquid is much higher than in a large vessel. And I saw there was something in the chat coming up.
Yep, that's just Craig thanking you so much for your time and telling us all about your family's winery and history.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I hope to see you folks in my part of the world. I mean, when they let you travel again, we have accommodation in Florence where I'm currently in our palace, and Beverly has been in those accommodation, and she's been also in accommodation in the countryside as well. So we can have you staying right in the center of Florence or in the middle or right in the heart of Chianti.
Yes,
So,
the apartments are in the palace. So it's really quite special.
Thank you.
And
Thank
one
you.
of them has a rooftop terrace. You can see the entire city.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. And I hope you enjoy the Vinsanto soon.
There's your son. He's gotten so
will.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have some patience, it appears.
There you go. 2001. Yeah, you have some good patience. Definitely.
Do you mind
Ellen,
share one
Ellen says,
photo?
I will open for, I mean, it could age forever. So I would, you choose the occasion because there's not a problem. Not a problem.
Right.
I mean, the age for next, maybe you can wait for his 18 years, when he's 18 years old for you.
I'm not that patient.
We're not that patient.
So yeah, just choose a date to celebrate something special and open a bottle. Absolutely. Yeah, because, it's not a problem for him. Not a problem. As I said, it can age. You still have, Beverly, you still have bottles open in the fridge?
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
I have 9. I think I might have something of 7.
There you
There
go.
might be a little bit left. Yeah. I'm not much of a drinker, strangely enough, but I open them every now and then and just smell the aroma. It makes me very happy.
Very
Would you
good.
mind if we shared a quick photo, Sebastiano?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Of course.
Okay. Oh, it does. Looks like I can't do it. Never mind. I found a photo from the dinner of you and your wife and Jason and I.
Oh,
Looking
What?
a little younger.
A little,
Me.
and like I've had a few glasses of wine.
Yeah.
there you go. That's always the case. That's always the case.
Always the case.
Ellen said that she would be in Italy in October and was wondering if she could get a chance to stomp down on the grapes if she's in Tuscany.
Sure, she can come and visit. Absolutely, we'll be very happy to have her.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Bring your swimming trunks.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
If no one else has any questions, I'd just like to thank Sebastiano so much for his time and for talking all about these great wines and his family and his history. And I'd also love to thank Bev and Kathy for getting these wines into all of our hands as well. And Bev as well for helping us organize this all.
It's a partnership always, so we're also very appreciative of Alex and Tom's enthusiasm for the property and the wines, and they do a wonderful job of supporting what I do, as many of you do as well. And I always say I can't do what I do without all of you.
Thank you, Bev.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Bev.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Alex.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Marcella. Thank you all, folks, for listening to me for such a long time. Hope I wasn't too boring.
I can't wait to taste in person with all of you again
Yes.
Yeah.
Soon.
soon.
As soon as they let me out of the cage, I'll be fine again. Take care.